We turn now to the deadly mass shooting in Las Vegas. Senator Dianne Feinstein joins us from San Francisco. Senator, you're supporting a bill that would ban these bump fire stocks. Do you have any Republican support for that bill?
We have Republican interest. I have nobody lined up. We have 38 co-sponsors. They're all Democratic. We've had individuals that have indicated an interest, and particularly for a hearing. All of this becomes extraordinarily difficult because these events get worse and worse. And I think, John, every American saw this. CNN has been running the pictures of the 57 people who were killed. And if that doesn't break one's heart, nothing does. And when you hear the staccato of gunfire and how these bump fire stocks have changed a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon, and you see what can be done with it, and the distance from which it's done, and the height from which it's done, you come to the conclusion, we've got to stop this. And there's only one way to do it, and this is that way.
The NRA put out a statement on Thursday suggesting they would support looking into regulations that would keep these bump fire stocks from being sold. What did you make of that position?
Well, I thought that's a step forward, and it's appreciated. Regulations aren't going to do it, and the ATF has said as much in a letter to a congressman a year or so ago. We need a law. It can't be changed by another president. Right now, we're seeing one president change actions of a president that came before him, and that would happen in this area. So we need a law, and we have an opportunity to get it. And I hope that Americans will step up and say, enough is enough. Congress, do something. And this, we believe, is written in a way that there's enough plain English that it would cover any type of addition that would be used to drive up the level, the rapidity of the firing. And it would solve the problem.
What do you make of the increased sales of bump fire stocks in the wake of the shooting and then now legislation? What do you make of that?
See, I don't know what to make of it. What this event said, this is a well-to-do man. He wasn't mentally ill. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a juvenile. He wasn't a gangbanger. And he was able to buy 40 weapons over a period of time, have 12 bump stocks, line them up, break through 2 windows in his hotel suite, and take aim at tens of thousands, well, I guess over 1,000 people at a concert. And this was such a cross-section of America that it really struck at every one of us that this could happen to you, and we want to stop it. So I don't know what people think in their head about this. It's amazing. But
is there any law that could have stopped him? That you just described that he was not in any of the categories that people normally look out for. So could there have been any law passed that would have stopped him?
No. He passed background checks registering for handguns and other weapons on multiple occasions.
So there's no law that could have stopped him, and one of the things that's been a part of this debate is some people right after this massacre called for more gun regulation, said something must be done, blamed the NRA, and what gun rights advocates heard is they heard that call for something to be done, and what they heard in that is people essentially saying we want to ban semi-automatic weapons or regulate them in such a way that it would shrink the right to own those kind of weapons to nothingness. And so that's what they heard.
Well, that's just plain wrong. This is written in clean English. You can take a look at it. I'll send a copy of it. It's a 2-page bill. I'll send a copy of it to anyone who calls our office, and you can look at it yourself. It was written by people who knew guns. It was part of our 2013 assault weapons bill. So it had been out there in the currency, and I've had no one say that this is not adequate to handle the problem. It does not take anyone's gun.
Let me ask you this, Senator, from the other side, those who would like to restrict guns in America, who hear a bill targeted, as you've described it, narrowly at this idea, at bump fire stocks, and say, the only way to stop this kind of situation in America is to ban these kinds of semi-automatic weapons and weapons that can fire with rapidity. And anything short of that is insufficient. What do you say to those people?
I agree with them to a great extent. What I don't, because as you know, I did the assault weapons legislation in 1993, which was law of the land for 10 years. So I believe, I mean, I've watched this thing from the Texas bell tower to today in schools, in businesses, in workplaces. No one appears to be safe anywhere. And this is kind of the apex because it affects so many people. It killed so many people. How can anyone say that these additions are positive things when machine guns have been made illegal? And what this does is enable a semi-automatic weapon to become a machine gun. It's a way around the law.
Do you feel, Senator, on the gun control side, that there is a kind of fatigue that is set in? I've heard so many people say after Newtown, the shootings there, if nothing could be done, when can anything be done? And a fatigue among those who share your views on this.
Well, let me say something. I've gone through this for decades now. I never thought this would be the America I would live in, where people would shoot other people the way they do today. We know we have a problem. We know that problem is getting worse. To just sit back and do nothing about it but carp and criticize makes no sense. This is one small thing which will take out of circulations these apparatuses that are added to weapons to make them something that they aren't. That's all this does. This prevents a semi-automatic weapon from being made into a machine gun.
Let me ask you a question, get your thoughts on another piece of legislation the NRA has mentioned in response to this shooting. They've talked about passing the concealed carry reciprocity, which essentially allows somebody who has a concealed carry permit in one state to carry it throughout all other states the way, say, a driver's license would work. What's your opinion of that bill, which is in the Senate?
Well, my opinion of that bill is it's terrible. We want every American to feel comfortable packing a concealed weapon around the country. I represent 40 million Californians, and I can say without hesitation, Californians do not want concealed carry.
If they say, though, that this is a right protected by the Second Amendment of the Constitution, why is it California who gets to deny people the exercise of that right?
Well, I don't believe it is protected by the Constitution to conceal it without a permit.
Well, in this case, they would say if you had a permit in one state, then that permit would be honored by the other states, again, like to say the way a license would be for driving.
Well, I'm saying, and I'm speaking for California here, I'm saying that the state I represent would not want any part of that, nor should any American. You just make the situation worse. You let somebody with a weapon who may do you harm get close to you. Why would you want that?
Let me switch here to another topic for you, which is the Senate Intelligence Committee work that you've been doing. Chairman Burr of that committee said that the question of collusion between the Russians trying to influence the election and the Trump campaign was still an open question. Is that because there's more disclosures that suggest it's a possibility, or just because nothing's been found yet and it's an open question because there's no proof that it's happened?
I think the latter. It's an open question because there's no proof yet that has happened. And I think that proof will likely come with Mr. Mueller's investigation. He's got the ability to use a grand jury. He's got the ability to use the power of subpoena without question. And he's got the ability to do a criminal investigation. And that's what's going on, and I think that's where the information will come. What happens in a political body, and I am finding this as the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, everything has to be negotiated with the party in power. And it's very difficult to do an investigation under those circumstances. Mueller doesn't have that problem. Mueller can put together a top team, a grand jury, and just go out and get the job done. So my thinking is that's where it's likely to come from. Now, I think once he makes a finding, there may be the kind of evidence that's necessary to wrap a law around. and then it becomes a real matter for the Congress. We're going to keep trying on the Judiciary Committee because the issue of collusion and the issue of obstruction of justice happen to fall under the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee. But both sides have to be able to come together in subpoenaing people, being able to get the nexus in the data that makes an interview worthwhile, and then being able to have staff interview and then full public hearings. I think the public deserves that. You know, I'm concerned by the difficulty in putting this together. I think we're very lucky to have Mr. Mueller's investigation going on.
So if I hear you right, Senator, are you saying essentially that it's been too politicized and therefore the Senate really can't do the kind of inquiry you think is necessary?
Well, the Intelligence Committee, now, I'm not in charge any longer on intelligence, I'm just a member, but they have moved ahead. They have been able to do over 100 interviews, and they feel very confident in where they're going. It's a bit of a greater struggle on the Judiciary Committee. We have done, I think, one interview. We've got a lot of documents, but there is always a negotiation over every subpoena, and there shouldn't be a negotiation over every subpoena. Collusion and obstruction of justice ought to be our cause, not opening other areas that are not necessary to go into.
What would be an example of that?
Another investigation of Hillary Clinton would be an example of that.
Let me ask you about this question of White House private email accounts that have been disclosed in the press. Is that something that that the Intelligence Committee should look into? Is that of concern to you?
Yeah, well, this is an area still without specific definition. And I think that we need legislation or we need rules that are set down that everybody in the White House, every Secretary of State, every senator knows. I've never had any instruction on how to use email. We now separate our personal and our campaign goes on one device, and the Senate device is kept just for Senate matters. But when I came, and to very recently, that wasn't the case. Everything was on one device, and nobody said anything about it. So I think what is necessary is clear clarification as to what everyone must do. There have been other secretaries of state, other than Secretary Clinton, who did everything on personal email, and probably in the White House too. So what I'm saying is that this is kind of a non-specific area that needs to be made specific with either a rule or legislation. Final
question, Senator. The president is thinking about decertifying the Iranian nuclear deal, which means he would essentially kick it over to Congress and say, Congress, you can sanction Iran again or add new sanctions which would break the deal. If Congress did nothing, the deal would essentially remain intact. What do you think the appetite is in Congress for more sanctions on Iran?
Well, I'll tell you this, John. Yesterday, or day before yesterday now, in the Senate Judiciary Committee, we had a very complete intelligence briefing on Iran. There is no question but that Iran has complied with the strictures of the deal. And when either IAEA found something or anyone else found something, it was quickly remedied if there was a glitch. So they have cooperated, I think, 100%. Now, does everybody like everything that Iran is doing? No. And particularly in the Middle East, the extension of Iranian power is causing concern. In Lebanon with Hezbollah, and in other areas in Yemen. And the hope is you can't put this all into the nuclear agreement because nowhere, nohow is it any part of the nuclear agreement. I think the greatest ramification from this would be to really create a crisis with North Korea, because it would give North Korea reason to believe, well, nothing the Republicans do can you trust. When you have the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, China, and the United States all agreeing to support something, and then the United States goes through an election, the new president pulls us out, what does that say?
Senator, another question on the Intelligence Committee. Vice Chairman Mark Warner has called for the Facebook ads that were purchased by Russian entities during the election to be made public. Why is that important?
I think it's important so people can see. And the technical analysis is made by technical staff of what all of this means. But I think people have a right to see what all of this is. And I must really commend Facebook for doing this, because it is a breakthrough moment. And hopefully we will be getting more cooperation from the tech community in this very difficult arena. This is not easy stuff, because people abuse it. They use it for reasons that inventors didn't think would be possible. Encryption has a double edge to it, and it's a very difficult arena. So I think Facebook did the right thing and by producing this information. And I think you can ask us, at least ask our side of it, the judiciary side of it, some questions in about a week or two when we have an opportunity to go through all of these Facebook messages.
All right, Senator Feinstein, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, John.